Hello, hello, it's Jay Ruane. And if you're listening to this or watching this, I need you to do me a favor. We try to give as much information as we can out in the law firm blueprint. But if you're listening to the podcast or watching on the show, please give us a 5-star review on the podcast or give us a comment down below. Ready to go, Seth? Here we go,
Jay.
All right. Hello, hello, it's Jay Ruane, and welcome to another edition of the Law Firm Blueprint. I almost messed up our own name. Anyway, I'm Jay Ruane. He is Seth Price, and we are here to talk all about running our law firms and how we get through the struggle day in and day out. Seth, how's your week going this week? I saw that you were traveling.
I was out at PIMCon. Had a great time last week. We got CleoCon coming up. All sorts of cool stuff in the air.
Cool. Well, I don't travel, so I don't really have that stuff. I just hang out with my cool hat. I don't know
exactly.
If
the hat doesn't. You need an extra seat. There's a whole controversy as to whether or not you'd have to buy an extra seat for the hat.
I mean, I don't know what the hat size is. I already wear a 7 and 6/8 hat when I buy a hat, so I can only imagine what this hat actually would be. I'll have to measure it up and report back. But anyway, I want to talk to you about something because you know me. And you call me Mr. Systems. I love systems. Systems allow my ADHD brain to actually function and scale my law firm. But I have been talking to members of my criminal mastermind over the last 3 months. We've been doing a sort of an accelerator program for a dozen of them, trying to sort of figure out what their problems are, get the solutions in place so that by the end of the year, they can enter 2026 really firing on all cylinders. And the one thing that has been a consistency among all the people that I've talked to, and then I went back to my notes and I look at the people I've talked to over the years, both in the criminal defense field, in other fields. And it seems to me that systems aren't necessarily the problem. It's delegating that is the problem for these lawyers. And there's 3 problems when it comes to delegating. I want to talk to you about them because I think it's something that we can be honest about with our audience about where we are when it comes to delegating.
Okay, I'll push back for a second. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's the intersection of the two.
Okay.
Because you've told me stories over the years where something didn't go right, and we blame it on delegation. I know you want to talk about delegation today, but if there was a system actually in place, so there are 2 questions. One, is there a system? Second, is it being followed? Right? Is a process issue. And so the question is, academic systems are one thing, but are they trained? Are they bought into? And are they being used? And so if they're not, they're great, and we can put them in a file somewhere because we have all these beautiful J. Ruane systems. But if they're not actually being used, then the struggle that I know you want to talk about today is the letting go and delegating, which I know is a big issue for everybody in our audience, present company included. But I think that the question becomes, when you delegate and something doesn't work, is it because you don't have a system or the system is not being followed?
So here's what I have learned over the years. There's really 2 main areas where lawyers get into problem with delegating. The first one is nobody can do it like I can. And you even get into things, if you have a system for keeping a client up to date on what's going on, what'll happen is the lawyer will delegate to the paralegal, create this letter, and then the paralegal puts it on the lawyer's desk for the signature, and then the lawyer makes a million corrections, even though what was said was supposed to be said, but the lawyer would say it a little differently. I mean, we're not talking a major error. We're talking, I wouldn't use it in the past tense. I would do it in the present tense, stuff like that. So lawyers have this sort of micromanaging nature, and I get it. Our licenses are on the line, and our reputations are on the line, and so we do that.
But I have 2 thoughts before I forget, so I'm going to throw them out to you and remind me. One is content for websites. The second is basically AI answering services. So I'm going to use those 2 to sort of talk about this. So to me, I see this from a BluShark point of view, as well as a price benefits point of view. My law partner Dave loves freaking messing around with content. I got a buddy up in Michigan who works with BluShark outside the PI space, and he loves going over the stuff. As you're talking about, it's not the way I would have said it. I'm like, it's freaking web content. Don't get disbarred. Get your keywords in there. get the page count to the right amount, and make sure that it's showing up, because if it doesn't show, it doesn't do you any good. And so
Right.
it's that mentality, similar to, you could have written that better. Was that going to make you $1 more? So, okay, you could have X number of clients with the perfect salutation, or you could have 3X the clients with an inferior salutation. What do you want for yourself? You could have a website with 4
Right.
pages of content, or you could have 4,000 that's not up to your exact liking. What do you want?
Well, I mean, the lawyer in me is like, if it's my name being attached to it, I want to look at every single page. I want to sound, and that's an ego. That's the ego problem of being a lawyer. Like, it's you. It's not a widget. It's you that's serving the client. And so a lot of lawyers, I think, get in their own way. They
Yeah,
get in their own way because they micromanage those types of things. And
correct.
I have tried to train myself, and I'm learning, and I'm trying to get better at it, at avoiding being the bottleneck in my office. And the other problem with delegation that I see as a common refrain is, it's faster if I just do it myself. And I was the
You're the king of that.
bottleneck at the beginning of this podcast and show. I would just do the editing because I could edit in 15 minutes. And I was just like, I'll just do it myself. It's faster if I do it myself. And then I got burned out from it.
And how many times did we never hit air on time? It was a cluster. I mean, it's self-fulfilling. It started off fine, but
Right.
it wasn't good at scale.
Right. And so those are the two main problems. Nobody can do it like I can, and it's faster if I do it myself. And that's the problem with lawyers and delegating.
Well, so I'm going to go to the analogy. I'm going to take the second analogy, right? So the first one is, and I had this post on LinkedIn this week talking about when we first had Twitter, and I had some F-tard marketing intern guy who announced on Twitter that Price Bennett would be giving legal advice on the Twitter feed. The one thing you can't do, he announces. It sucked. We didn't get this barred. You move on, you live, and you do it. But it's first, if you're not willing to live with something that's not imperfect, you're like, the moment you want to go beyond yourself, it's not going to be Jay. But I think the interesting thing we're seeing, I know you've dabbled with AI voice answering, which is getting better by the day, in my opinion, for frontline sales. It's so close. But I had a period of time at my office where phones weren't being answered. And I'm guessing anybody listening to the podcast, at some point, if they were honest and had real data, you had points where there's a hole in your bucket. Overnight answering service that picked up 3 minutes later. I had that at one point. A guy who was just in charge of my team that didn't care and wasn't getting the stuff before I had better checks and balances. And so when I look at an AI answering service, or AI intake, let's call it, right? That's the hot topic right now. I counted 12 different people pitching me on AI intake, right? Some claiming to actually close the loop with retainers going out.
Well, yeah, because you're not selling. That's for PI.
Correct. No, I'm not pretending.
Nobody's selling by AI.
But it would be the same as criminal, sifting it out, right? Meaning you're still the first person you're speaking to. And there's negatives, right? We know that there are negatives and that some people are going to be annoyed. Some people are going to like it, what have you, at least depending on the level that you have. But so one sense, you're dealing with how many people say, how many cases did you lose? And you missed that big truck case because you had this. But the question that nobody's asking the other way, very similar to self-driving cars, is how many people are you missing because your answering service never picked up? Your person was out to lunch and it went to voicemail. I had a group the other day, BluShark, telling me the calls are going to effing voicemail when they don't pick up in the office. And I'm like, it's blowing my mind. So, just like I would put the analogy, next level analogy is the Tesla when it had self-driving cars. It's clear that they can do that, but that 1 out of X number of cars will have accidents, some of them serious. How many cars that aren't self-driving? I took a Waymo for the first time the other night in Phoenix. It was the most amazing experience. I felt safer the way it was driving than
Really?
60% of the Uber drivers I get driving through DC. There's no.
Well, that's probably because you don't tip enough, so you only get the lowest rated drivers.
I pay enough to the credit cards. They give me the 5 O's despite that. But I'm not a big tipper like Jay. But the idea that there are going to be accidents, but how many accidents are there with human error? versus the one, I'm making this up, but let's say one out of 10,000 rides you take with with human driver has an accident, but it's one out of 50,000 with autonomous driving. Your odds are better, but that one is going to be salacious. If you lose one case with AI answering, I'm bringing it back to you. We're coming to land the plane back to Jay. If you lose that one case, great. What you don't have is how many did you lose because your answering service that you never secret shop is not up to par. Brings it back to delegating. How much are you going to lose when that person's salutation isn't as good versus how many more clients can't you serve because you want the perfect salutation?
Yeah, and I mean, I think part of the problem is that, as lawyers, we are trained to look at the minutia, but in delegating, you almost have to let
Well,
people go and be prepared for some mediocrity, right?
well,
I mean, if you have the systems for them to follow, there shouldn't be the mediocrity. I think so. So we've got like you put the cart before the horse. Do you build the systems first? Do you have someone to delegate to first?
and how
You
much
know
is
what?
look, for those of you who've been longtime listeners, you remember we had Michael Gerber on during COVID. And Jay and Michael almost got into fisticuffs through Zoom. Granted, we were both held up in our because Gerber's concept was everything it needs to be, everything must be E-Myth. It's his book, it's his
Right.
life, it's his livelihood. And Jay's like, no, you're paying for the intellect. And the truth, like most things in life, is somewhere in between. But those, the question is, and I always ask this: what is reasonable? My partner calls it McDonaldized. What can reasonably be McDonaldized? And at scale, I now have trainers that sit there, they create processes, they train, they do this. But for most people, and for me along the way, when you don't have that, you can have all the systems that Jay wants in the world, but unless they're adopted and followed
And used.
and
Like,
used, just like software. How many of us have software? I remember way back in the day, we got TrialWorks, and I was horrified because we trained everybody day one, and 2 years later, X number of employees had churned, new employees. Nobody knew had ever been trained. Like, meaning it was just shocking where we were at, 12, 15 years or whatever it was. And so I'm sitting there sort of like figuring out how do you put the stuff in place and not just stop the business of your firm, but put the resources there to create it so that you do feel, because if the systems are there and they're being followed, you have a better shot at being willing to delegate. Or you're like me, where you're a quick start and you just don't care. But the J. Ruane sort of I care, it is a balance, isn't it?
right. Well, it is a balance, but then here's the question that I have for you. Then, knowing who you are and using your mantra of you're going to do the stuff that you love to do and avoid the stuff that you don't love to do. I don't know a single lawyer who loves. I mean, I use them. I don't love sitting around and creating systems. I don't love sitting around and creating training
I
programs.
don't know, dude. You don't do meth. You're not like a gambling addict. I think it's your thing.
I have some vices, but anyway, my vices are buying tickets. I have a hook, a line on MSG Club tickets, and I would like to sit there for the Big East tournament.
I may need Knicks the Friday of Thanksgiving 4.
Okay, let me see my guy and see what I can do. But anyway, getting back to the delegation thing, I think part of the problem is that as smaller law firms start to grow, I think the whole delegating thing needs to take forefront. You need to decide as an owner, what are you comfortable in delegating and who are you going to delegate it to? It's very easy for us as lawyers to delegate, filing something at the courthouse with a paralegal, and that's their responsibility in getting that done. But there's a lot of the business operations stuff that some lawyers still try to do when really they should be delegating that to an integrator who is getting that stuff done, to use that term from the traction community, EOS
But it's not
community.
integrate. It's the look, the longer that I do this, and I love the mastermind experience with John Fisher. Next one, February in Puerto Rico. It looks like numbers are freaking awesome. people are showing. I hope you block it and do it and make it a vacation. But the thing that I see there, because as you know, there's a bunch of us that are sort of playing at an elite level, and a bunch of us are, sometimes you're giving back. But the thing that I see that everybody from $500,000 to 3 million and beyond, but that is where that is, that people are struggling with the non-lawyer professional. Call it what you want: office manager,
Firm
operations manager,
administrator,
director of
COO,
operations.
director of operations, right?
It's a curve, right, all the way up to COO. COO, most people don't actually get to because it's $250,000 to $300,000. But whatever that play is, when I look at price benefits and people say, "Hey, what was the gasoline besides marketing?" It was putting that person in place. Brian Benavidez, our admin, head of intake, eventually ops. We didn't call it a COO, but he didn't have that pedigree, but he did it. And having that person where that whether it's a lease issue, an employee issue, that everything can stop with somebody other than you, that's when you actually have a fighting chance to scale.
So how soon then? Let me ask you this then. How soon then do you try to bring somebody into that role? Is it you've got a paralegal, you've got somebody on intake? Is that your fourth hire? Say you're a lawyer with a paralegal, you hire somebody to do your intakes, and then is your fourth hire the director of operations or whatever
you
you
never
call
like my
it?
answer because it depends.
It
But
depends.
no. But there are a bunch of factors. I'll give you one major one. For me and
Okay.
Dave Beno, we started with 2 principles. You can wait a lot longer with 2. Not that I'm sure we waited too long. We absolutely did. But when if you want to stay as a sole entrepreneur, which is awesome, you're not splitting with anybody, there are no disagreements, a lot of benefits. That is where I'll spend your money for you, which is as soon as you can afford, and then push a little bit. I mean, we always talk about hiring. Don't look at the year salary, look at it in quarters, 6 months if you have to, and what it's going to do. But you're not splitting your baby with somebody. You need somebody to be and it's a fuck ton cheaper to get somebody for $1.20, $1.10 if you have to, that's sitting there, than giving half your profits to somebody else. And if that allows you to do it without bringing a partner in, that's the best deal ever. I'd pay a lot more than that splitting with somebody at the house.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you have somebody that you can, as long as they're a get it done person, and I think it's challenging to find that right person, and you could go through a lot of ugly ducklings before you get to that right person. But I think you need to start thinking delegation even before you're ready to delegate.
Like every hire, because and when I see it, it is the consistent number one issue. Putting marketing aside for a second, because that's a whole other beast, which we'll talk about for days. But the number one struggle facing firms is doing that and figuring out what's right. I've made every mistake in that. When Brian fell off his motorcycle, we hired a guy who was a legal professional. He had worked at big law firms. It was a bad culture fit. We weren't thinking in those terms. It was thinking big law, not the scrappy. I mean, there's a mindset that you and I have. You're less cheap than I am, but the idea that I want money spent as myself, and it's a struggle. We really, really struggle with that, and that it's tough. And now, look, we have a multi 8-figure revenue stream, but it still kills me. We had somebody throw a party the other night that was supposed to be, a $2,500, $3,000 affair, and I got an $8,000 bar bill. It was a great night, but the idea is there, but I intellectually, let's say it's a $4,000 or $5,000 delta over what it should have been, that is part of letting go. That is part of, I hope to have my cake and eat it too, and hope that I'll settle for, 75 cents on the dollar, for that. But that if if I did it myself, it would have been $3,500. I didn't do it myself. They didn't check wristbands that were checked or not checked on an uncapped bar. And those are the things in life that, but we had the best event we've had in the last 2 years, and people loved it.
Let me ask you this then: is there a dollar amount as a business owner that you say, if it's this or under, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm not even worried about it. And
And
this will change. I mean, when I was a young lawyer, if it was $100 or under, I wouldn't worry about it. My number has changed. I'm wondering if Price Benowitz or you have a number in that respect where you're just like, it's not worth the time for me to worry about it at this number anymore.
I don't have that. It's a great question. I know that Jay with systems will have that. I have,
Mine's 2,500.
2,500. And that's
2,500 at my revenue rate, um, and my staff. I know that if they spend up to $2,500 more than whatever it was I was expecting to spend, I'm not gonna cry over it because I can't. If I wanted to cry over things, that would still be way down on the list of things I'd cry over. So I'm just
I
gonna
think that I
chalk
think
it
that's
up
you know
to
what
cost of doing business.
that's a really good number from a big picture gross number. I like to think it's 5 grand, but I think the 2,500 delta, meaning they
Yeah,
had
2,500 delta. So
right,
if I was
right.
taking people
That
out to the
party
Big
was
East tournament,
2,500. There was another
and
event that we did something else. Those are the ones that drive me crazy. Look, but I'll tell you, this is going into the weeds. We had a farewell party for 7 people, and there was like $500 worth of chicken wings out on a table. I mean, it's shocking stuff. I see, somebody had a birthday and instead of buying one cake, they bought two because they thought there were going to be all these people there. In the post-COVID world, there's no, you're buying multiple bundt cakes from the bundt cake place. They're delicious, but so yes, I try not to sweat the small stuff of the extra $70 bundt cake that's sitting there unnecessarily. But look, that is another, but it's actually in the continuum of letting go because
right,
and I sit there, I'm not happy about it. When I see it, I say, but if it's out of sight, out of mind, how much stuff don't I see? You try to put systems, you talk about end of year credit card bills,
yep.
every once in a while, some, cell phone bills, and, copier leases, all of that stuff.
I mean, the delegation thing, when it comes to, you're basically trusting other people to spend your money
So
and
I'm
make
going to go one. I'm
decisions.
going to go a little controversial here. Not controversial, but I'm going into the real world. So
Okay.
we had a contract that we were interested in signing on the tech side, and my tech guy interviewed a group, and it was brought by somebody that I knew, and they brought their group in, or the one that they were representing, and in doing so, it did not go well. A number of things were said that were either not true, misleading, or not what we wanted. And it
Okay.
was a group that one of those ones they didn't know who you were every time they came. They didn't really understand what you were doing. And my delegating person, the person I'm talking, my director said, you know what, this doesn't hit our firm's core values. I don't want to, I don't want to deal with them. And I got a very angry follow up with the when I say relationship, somebody, a new business friend. And that's sort of the other sort of, sort of ghost of Christmas future for many of our listeners here, where as you do that, there's positives. As you're talking about sort of the negative about being tough letting go, there are areas I have let go, but knowing that, I don't say it's a cost, but you support that person. Is it possible if
Right.
you or I were there, we could have reset how that went down and figured out a way to work with them? But if I'm going to empower this person and say you're empowered to bring the people that you want, I'm going to bring them opportunities, but I have to trust and not put a
Right.
thumb on the scale. If they're seeing stuff that doesn't hit their sensibility, I'm dancing with them. And we've seen that because there are times when that happens, you find out a year later, you know what? My guy wasn't right. I feel pretty confident at this point in time that with my directors, they are making decisions where they get it and I support them. But it's an interesting, going back to the J. Ruane concept of letting go. It's the other side of letting go that there can be damage. Look, I think in the end, he probably made the right move based on everything that we saw during this situation. But it is sort of like once you finally start to delegate, there are other issues that come up with it.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, and this is why, I spent some time this weekend. It'll be out soon. I wrote a whole book about the lawyers and delegating and getting out of their own way. So I'll do some shameless self promotion of that. I know I have a copy to use so that you can give me a quote for the back cover. But I think you can have all the systems in the world, but if you don't delegate appropriately and delegate responsibly, it's not going to help him because
Or are you allowing it to happen at all? Right? I mean, because
yeah,
academically, you're saying, hey, somebody could buy your set of systems,
yeah,
but
but then they don't.
if the
But
mindset doesn't change, but I think like most things, I don't say it depends, but it's doing it smart. It's knowing where you do want to do it, and especially when you're less further along this curve, it's figuring out what you like and what you're good at. What's the true intersection, and what are the areas that have less downside? Bar license, be a little tighter. The salutation, be a little looser.
yeah,
Being the Chad Dudley concept of at any one time somebody's screwing something up and I'm okay with it. You're not happy about it, but
no, no, no,
you wouldn't be able to service people the same way, right? When you go to sleep, you're done. I have people answering the phone. Are they going to screw something up? Yeah, something's not going to be right. But you know what? We're training them. We're listening to recorded calls. We're putting stuff in place as best we can, and piece by piece. And I think that there's a certain amount. Let's sort of maybe land the plane with this. That is there a certain amount of burying your head in the sand that's needed at all in order to make that leap? Because if with perfect knowledge, it's really tough to do that. And that at some level, are you sort of making that leap to be able to say, I'm okay that it's not going to be done as well as just me, but for Jay to get you would price yourself out of the world if you touched everything and have a very limited number of people you touched.
right. I mean, and that at the end of the day, I think you need to be sort of like a unrepentant optimist as a business owner that things are going to be better, my people are going to do it right, and anything that comes up we're going to solve. Because if you were a pessimist in this business, you'd be out of this business.
Correct.
It's
And
just, you can't do it unless you're an optimist. I have, and it's funny, I don't do it myself, but I have some good friends that are, for lack of a better term, degenerate gamblers. They are the most optimistic people that you'll ever meet because the over's going to cover, the lines. I mean, it's unbelievable. They're going to bet the grand salami, and then that night, there's going to be 43 goals in every hockey game, and the over under on it was 20, and they always go the over. They're unrepentant optimists, and I think to some extent you got to have that in this business as well as a law firm owner. You got to believe that next lead is going to sign. You're going to get a good fee. Case is going to work out timely. Everyone's going to make money. Everyone's going to be happy. You got to have that. Otherwise, boy, this is a pretty miserable job to have, huh?
yeah, and I'll conclude with the story. It was from my rehearsal dinner, which was like a 2-hour roast, one of the best nights of my life. A good friend of mine from her childhood sort of summed it up. It's like the law firm was starting, had some real estate that was going sideways in those early years, and she's like, you wake up, these people are trying to screw you, they're trying to do this, they're trying to do that, and you got to wake up and start all over the next day. And
Yeah.
I think that may be at the core, that the number of things. I had a lawyer, one of our 50 lawyers, gave notice. How you ever have somebody give notice and they've already in their mind burned the boat. The ship has been
Oh,
burned.
yeah.
And, our goal right now was, it's in a jurisdiction we don't have a backup in. We just care about the clients being taken care of. And this is somebody taking a new job in 2 weeks, and it's scary. And
Yeah.
the person's upset. We're trying to follow best practices. They're not buying in. And, our attitude is, and I'm sure yours is, here's, whenever in doubt, you're not going to say, I did this many hours, now go find a new lawyer. It's like, here's all your money back, go find yourself a new lawyer. Meaning, you never want to
Yeah.
be like, oh yeah, I researched your stuff, but just like if when your contractor quits, you got to start from scratch. You're not getting any credit for the framing the first guy did. And
Right.
so, it's these things. You're just like, this is a guy who I like so much, did such good stuff for so long. At some point, he was like, you know what? They're asking me to play within the system. I'm done. These guys are no good because they want me to play within the system. And you just got to get up the next day. And you know what? I got an interview on Friday with an amazing person, a Dane Phillips. Like, for those of friends of the show, know that Dane is a guy that I met through being on a podcast, who's now, I don't know, 7 years with us in South Carolina. But like, you know what? this one's not right. We're going to get it right now.
Cool. Well, it sounds like a lot. I just wanted to talk a little bit about delegation because I think it's so important.
It will not be
for
our
lawyers.
last time talking about delegation.
No, I think we'll talk a little bit more. But folks, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you for being with us. If you heard at the top of the show, Seth was talking a little bit about my tip inspiration. I have Vinny Antonelli was my mentor when it came to tips. If you know where that reference comes from, please leave it in the comments. Let me know that you believe in the same tipping philosophy of Vinny Antonelli, or if you disagree with Vinny's approach to tipping.
Okay, so we've gone too long, but I'm going to still. So I have between you and Mario, who's like carry cash. I try to bring the Venmo out. The problem is not everybody does Venmo, but
you don't carry cash.
I historically have not. I don't like to.
I have a G note on me at all times.
I know. That's why we're different people. I have now started to move in that direction, and I get it. The hotel. I just had the nicest hotel room in recent memory in Arizona. I've always known that the cleaning people, that was what pushed me back, because it's the person who needs it the most. You don't see them. Right. There's nobody glad. You're not getting anything better because of it. You just do it because it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
I get it. And I'm pushing myself, trying to channel my Jay Ruane. I've always been the efficiency guy. The cash is not efficient, but it is part of that interpersonal back and forth.
Geez, I walk around sometimes and just give away 50s or 100s just for the hell of it.
I know, just different rules.
But it gets me indoors that I wouldn't otherwise get in, and people are always happy to see me. So, it's I feel like Jimmy. Okay, here's another movie reference. I feel like Jimmy Conway showing up the first time Henry Hill sees him at Goodfellas, where he's going around putting the bills in everybody's chest pocket. That's me. So if there's the Henry Hill reference.
Yeah,
I'll give you another reference. Vinny Antonelli. That's my inspiration when it comes to tips. And so Let me know if you know who Vinny is and where he comes from. I'll certainly give credit where credit is due.
Awesome,
folks. That's going to do it for us this week here on the Law Firm Blueprint. Of course, you can take us anywhere you want to go, and be sure to give me that 5-star review in the podcast when you're doing it. We only got like 16 reviews, but I know we got a lot more. We got thousands of people listening to this show, so we want to get that review count up so we can make those best of lists, folks. Otherwise, you can catch us live 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, live on LinkedIn and live in our Facebook group called The Law Firm Blueprint. I am Jay Ruane. He is Seth Price. We're The Law Firm Blueprint. Thank you for being with us. Bye for now.